this is the term radical innovation, breakthrough innovation, game-changing innovation, step-out innovation. It all means the same thing to us. It means how large, established, mature companies can make whole new platforms of business by bringing new to the world performance features to the marketplace. So it's very different from new product development or what we would call incremental innovation. So I will use those terms, radical and breakthrough and game-changing, interchangeably, like synonyms, okay? Okay. So we began in the mid-1990s with the observation that large US-based companies had been improving dramatically in our ability to do new product development or incremental innovation since about the mid-1980s, when we had been beaten single-handedly in the global markets in the automotive industry, primarily by the Japanese. And so we had been improving, working very hard with total quality management and new product development processes to improve, but at the expense of a company's ability to do the more step-out or breakthrough innovation. And the observation was that you had companies like Motorola, for example, who once every maybe 10, 15 years would come with a breakthrough innovation that would launch a new platform of business, but that these were very unsystematic, unable to predict when they were happening, and extremely infrequent in their occurrence. Too infrequent for the company's growth objectives. We had also the observation in Corning and a number of other companies. And so the dean at our business school was identifying these as a major issue and a big problem. And he wanted to try to launch this kind of a research program because our school, our business school, is very, very small. We're connected to a well-known engineering institution. And so in order for our business school to gain any traction or recognition in the marketplace, we needed to develop a platform of research that would build expertise in our school all together. So we wanted to elect to study a very multidisciplinary research problem that was very important to industry, and this was one that we were able to articulate clearly as obviously quite a big problem with relevancy. This is a particularly sad example for us. Another issue regarding how large established companies fail continuously at breakthrough innovation. So this gentleman, Steve Sassoon, he's an RPI alumnus who recently was inducted into RPI's Hall of Fame of Important Inventors because he invented the first digital camera. And he was an employee at the time for Kodak. Okay, so he won the National Medal of Technology and Innovation given to him by President Obama in 2009. In 2010, he was inducted into our Hall of Fame. And in 2012, his company filed for bankruptcy. So, what is that about? What do we know about Kodak? How well have they done in the digital camera market? Terrible, terrible, right? And yet the invention of the digital camera occurred in that company. They hold most of the patent rights to digital photography technology, and the sad part is that this guy is an RPI alum. And I believe he still has a job, but these very many people within Kodak have lost their jobs. So you look at organizations that invent breakthrough technologies and fail to take advantage of those in the marketplace. They cannot create the business platforms associated with those technologies. And in fact, we have a study that came out in 1997 that studied the Fortune 500 and equivalent-sized multinational corporations and finds that the average lifespan of these companies is shorter than that of one human being. It's ridiculous, right? Because in organization theory, we would expect organizations to go on and on because roles People fill roles. We have processes that make the company continue to evolve and mature and provide value to the marketplace. But in fact, it doesn't happen. Okay? So we also have, you guys probably know Blue Ocean Strategy, if you read any of these books. So these guys came out with their information also in 1997, where they were mentioning and showing to us that investments in incremental new product development, companies generally invest the vast majority of their R&D resources into incremental innovations, as opposed to breakthrough innovation projects, and look at the difference in the profitability. So we would not know this at the beginning of an investment in a breakthrough innovation project, obviously, because there's so much uncertainty, so much ambiguity, and yet if you look ex post, over time we find that these generate the growth of the organization. We will not review this, but what I want to show you is that academic literature, academic research is beginning to accumulate evidence over and over to show the financial returns to breakthrough innovation. We had this question a lot yesterday in our seminar with the faculty and the doctoral students. You know, it's very difficult to evaluate a portfolio of investments in breakthrough innovation because you can't get the net present value, the discounted cash flow, the internal rate of return. And yet when you start to look over time at a lengthy period of time, that in fact is what occurs. And so we're beginning to see this accumulate now in the literature. I think I have a couple of pages of these. On this particular study, I just wanted to show you a study in the pharmaceutical industry where these guys, Rajesh Chandy, he's at London Business School now, showed that in that industry, only 7% of the projects that were invested in were in the breakthrough innovation category. Pharmaceutical industry divides them up and codes them as in this manner. So that's quite a rare, it's a rare occurrence, and yet the majority of breakthrough innovations come from a minority of the companies, which implies that we can develop a competency to do this. It's not just pure luck. If it was pure luck, there'd be a uniform distribution of breakthroughs occurring across all those companies. Okay, so that's one implication. The original inventing companies introduced 75% of the breakthroughs. Okay, so if they invented it, they were more likely to actually commercialize it. And so the argument that being a fast second, copying or imitating would be more profitable does not show up in this literature, in this particular study. So actually investing in the research and development, first to invent and then to commercialize, turns out to be the better strategy. So this idea of open innovation and buying or incorporating others' technologies simply to commercialize turns out to be a less profitable strategy. The firms that successfully commercialize breakthrough innovation also are the ones with the most incremental innovations. So in general, companies that have a strategy of innovation tend to understand that you need to do both and invest in building both of those capabilities. And then breakthrough innovations achieve more than 3 times the net present value of technological breakthroughs alone. So the incorporation of business model innovations, production operations innovations are required in order to really benefit from the breakthrough technology and invention itself. So there are many, many aspects of innovation along the maturity and development of a breakthrough. Okay, so it's complicated. Okay, so in terms of just looking at the literature, one thing that comes out is that it's not necessarily just investing in R&D that creates competitive advantage for companies. But in fact, it's the processes or the capabilities to leverage that R&D into new platforms of business that become important. We end up calling this, we'll talk later on today, about this as an incubation capability. And we find in our companies that it is the rarest capability in organizations. It's absent in many organizations. And our conclusion is we need to learn and become more sophisticated and expert at developing these incubation capabilities. Okay, so that's all the setup about why it's important to study this topic. And we didn't have all that literature back in 1994, but we knew US corporations were having trouble. And in fact, many large multinational corporations are having this problem. So in 1995, we had the research question together as a small team. We were a team of 10 faculty within the Lally School and 1 or 2 from the School of Engineering at RPI. Can we describe the practices, the management practices that teams use that are trying to develop breakthrough innovation? Okay. If we could only just at least understand how they do it. Are they using the stage gate kinds of traditional new product development processes that companies have gotten quite good at? Are they using other processes? Because of course our working hypothesis was that if you apply a stage gate or an incremental innovation process to a breakthrough innovation, generally you will kill it right at the beginning of the first gate. So the traditional NPD process doesn't work, and what we did was we partnered with what's called the Industrial Research Institute, which is an organization of R&D managers and technical directors and chief technology officers of Fortune 1000 companies. And they identified for us 12 projects that had been given the go-ahead to proceed and were viewed by senior technical leaders as potential breakthroughs. But they hadn't come to market yet. In fact, some were just beginning. Some had been going on for 3 or 4 years in development. And it was perceived that these could be game changers in the industry. But we didn't know. So the study was prospective, not retrospective. We didn't look at breakthroughs in the market and say, how did you do that? We started with, we believe this is going to be a breakthrough, and we followed those teams forward for 5 years and interviewed them regularly and went to visit with them so that we could understand how they were, the challenges that they were facing, and how did they get around those challenges? How were they addressing those challenges? We were less concerned that the outcome of these projects were going to be a breakthrough. We were more concerned with how they managed the management processes that they were using, given that they believed they were in a context of a potential breakthrough innovation. Okay, also in that project, the result of our learning in these 5 years of interviews, we realized that there are certain very difficult problems that the teams were facing. And we, together with the Industrial Research Institute, developed a couple of management tools that could be used to help with those problems. So we'll talk about those. So that all took us till 2000, and we wrote our first book then, which is published by Harvard Business School, Radical Innovation, How Mature Firms Can Outsmart Upstarts. That's like startups, right? Because the conventional wisdom is that the breakthroughs happen in entrepreneurial startup firms, and then the big firms buy those little companies, right? But we were finding that's not necessarily the case. Okay. So everything that we learned there motivated us to carry on the next phase of research. This was not in the original plan. But what we learned here were a number of challenges and a couple of clues, a little bit of a theory about how companies could get better at doing this. And so the second phase of the research, we wanted to know, how can a company build a capability to do breakthrough innovation? Not just study one project, but study a management system that leadership would say, we need to do this over and over and over again. And so there we requested companies to participate who had a strategic intent to improve their capability for breakthrough innovation. So there we were studying the corporation as our unit of analysis. Okay. There we had 12 companies participating, and then a second set of companies that were validation sample that I will show you all this in a moment. Our team, our study team, was a multidisciplinary team, smaller this time, 6 people. Again, the same kind of a design. We looked prospectively. We followed those companies for 4 years. We talked with them every 6 months about the changes in their management system for breakthrough innovation. We talked with them more frequently than we talked in phase 1 with the project teams, because there was so much change occurring in their organizational structures that they were trying to implement. And then we also had the same situation of developing a couple of tools, and here we were finally able to, we knew enough from our qualitative work to develop a survey to begin to link management process with breakthrough innovation success outcomes. Okay. All right, so that one resulted in this book. It was published finally in 2008, even though the data was finished collecting here at 2005. It takes a long time to analyze all that data and write this book. So then, but we already realized, again, as a result of the learning there, we needed a third research question. And I will talk about this one at the end, because we've just completed that data collection and analysis, and we'll begin to write the book when I get home. Actually, I have to write the proposal for the book. So, but this one is all about people, because what we have come to believe is that in order to institutionalize a capability for breakthrough innovation, we have to have innovation roles that are very specific, very clearly defined, where people are measured on how they perform in those roles. Right now, it's whoever looks like a good project manager gets this project, right? Whether it's a breakthrough, whether it's not a breakthrough, there's certainly no career path for people who are doing this, right? So I'll show you some of that as we go along. Okay, so the first thing we needed to do was to define what we meant by breakthrough innovation, because in order to select projects to study in the first phase, the companies had to know what were the criteria. And together with the companies, through the Industrial Research Institute committee that worked with us, we arrived at this definition as what we would call an operational definition. So it had to be a project that at the time had a legitimate defined team and a budget, because many of these projects, they lose their budget, they lose their people, they go underground for a while, people come on Saturday and Sunday, sneak to do these projects, you know? And all of our projects did that, by the way. But at the time we chose them, they were legitimate projects with a budget and viewed as having the potential for significant strategic impact, all right, by developing either completely new performance features or a significant performance improvement or a dramatic reduction in cost. And these orders of magnitude were identified by the Industrial Research Institute. But industry to industry, those would be different. The idea being these latter two would open up whole new application spaces that had never been possible before. And then a capability for breakthrough innovation is that you've got portfolios of breakthroughs going so that you have a sustainable output. You're developing a pipeline of these over time. Okay, so these are the companies that we've studied. This is a kind of a busy slide, I know. But you can see, you probably recognize many of these companies' names. They're multinational companies, industrial, bureaucratic, hierarchical, slow-moving, but old companies, right? We always get the question, we got it yesterday, why didn't you study Apple? I mean, of course, or Google, some of these companies that everybody thinks of as innovative. And the answer is because if the company is run by its founder or its founding team, it doesn't have these problems, right? We want to study companies that have established and are really facing these kinds of issues, and learn how from among them, how are they managing? A company that's still run by its founder carries the culture of its founder, and all the decisions are ultimately made by the founder. So there's no system necessarily in place. So Steve Jobs, so 50 years from now, Apple will be very interesting to study if they're still here, right? Okay. Google, I think, will still be here. I don't know about Apple. So, okay. So these, anyway, these companies over here are all the companies we studied project teams. And then these 4 also qualified to enter our phase 2, which meant that these companies were trying to develop a management system for breakthrough innovation portfolios. But these did not, right? So they did not qualify to come into phase 2, and instead we added these companies. And I mentioned yesterday, one of the best days of my career was sitting in my office, and I get a phone call from Intel. And Intel said that they'd heard of our study and they wished to participate. That was pretty neat. So we developed what we call the 3rd cohort of companies. These guys all came to RPI after a couple of, in 2004 they began to come each 6 months, and we discussed particular issues that we were learning from these guys. So they were very useful for validating our results. And then finally, these companies have participated in this most recent phase. So you can see over the years we've conducted many, many interviews of really interesting scientists, R&D scientists, executives, even the president. We've interviewed the president of Sealed Air Corporation multiple times, the chief technical officer of many of these companies. It's been an absolute honor, really, to be able to get to meet and know these people, especially as a business school professor. I mean, I'm talking to technical research fellows in IBM, just outstanding people.